before we're just getting going, not even recording here. So, hey guys, welcome to Wapiti Wednesday live Q&A for June 21st. Sorry about that. We jumped in here and started rolling, and all of a sudden I'm like, crap, I better record because we're about to drop some nuggets and stuff here. So, joining us tonight, we have the voice behind Western Contours podcast, my good brother Guy Duplanche. Welcome, mister.
Thank you, my brother. I'm honored to be on this side of a Wapiti Wednesday, man. I was thinking about that today, and I was like, that's pretty daggum badass. So,
Yeah, you've been on that other side. Of course, you haven't been on one since we started using the old Zoom, and I mean, God, too bad old Larry from Oklahoma, and we're missing Mr. Jim down in Arizona, and normally we get a ragtag group in here that. It definitely goes down in classification when Anthony from Montana jumps in and joins us, but still a good loyal group.
good
But
group.
so yeah, we were just kind of talking about the lineup of grunt tubes behind you there, and we were starting to talk about the antagonizer from Mile High Note Game Calls, and to me, the antagonizer has the perfect amount of back pressure for note stability out of all of the tubes I've ever blown on. It's one of my absolute favorites,
Favorites. Yep.
and I'll tell you this because you said the new native is on its way to you. Wait until you blow on the native. The native is actually the note stability on the native is just incredible. I mean, it's just takes no effort at all for note changes. So the mouthpiece. I think those two, the new native tube and the antagonizer, are God the most user friendly grunt tubes. I mean, a lot of the others out there, their mouthpiece is too big and your air just floods out. And if you don't know how to build your own back pressure, you're going to
Right.
struggle with
Gonna
note
have a hard
stability and
time.
note changes. But those two just in fact, Greg, you purchased one a couple of weeks ago after I demoed this, didn't you?
I did.
Yeah.
And it shipped till August sometime.
Yeah, but you were one of the first 300, so yours is going to be autographed by
Mm-hmm.
Wayne.
Wayne, yep.
So that's what's kind of cool on that. So all right. So reason for tonight is lessons from the field, and I know Guy and I have had several conversations over the last few years about lessons learned out in the field, and I figured you guys kind of got tired of seeing my ugly mug every 2 weeks and listening to my voice, so I thought I'd have Guy jump in and join us, and we can just have a discussion about lessons learned. So any questions you guys think of or come up, or questions you may want to ask, just go for it. So Guy, let's kind of start preseason scouting. What are kind of some of the lessons that you've learned out there that could help a new elk hunter be more efficient?
Whoosh. That
Yeah,
is
I'm coming down the hot seat right off the get go.
that's like a 300 PRC, 212 grains, man, just coming at you one after the other, right? That's such a loaded question.
It is.
I think with the realm that we're in today, with all the available information, guys traveling, and I was one of those guys for years, right? Traveling hundreds of miles, if not thousands of miles, a day and a half at a time. We rely a ton on e-scouting. And I'm not going to say I'm not a fan of e-scouting, but there's more value in me sacrificing, a 2 or 3 day weekend, making the trek out after my e-scouting prior to season,
Yep.
and actually getting eyes on the landscape and getting as many miles as I can in preseason, and really exploring that terrain. And I think a lot of what happens is, I hear it all the time, and I know you do, is guys will look at, and you're one of the pioneers in, really getting e-scouting rolling for folks, and fat maps and Google Maps, the whole nine. They'll look at those contour lines on that map and not understand what that terrain is doing, right? We're going to go here, and we're going to go from this point to this point, and then this is our C spot, and we'll go from A to C, and then you get out there and you look up, and there's a 120-foot pine, and it's about this big, right? So then a guy looks up at that and it's like, A, B, and C are done, because I have no idea what that terrain looks like when I step out onto it, right? So then we end up, basically road hunting, and we're scouting and hunting and trying to scout and hunt. And then, frustration. I don't see any animals. I can't get away from here because I wasn't prepared for it. So, in a nutshell, get your butt out to the field, right? Sacrifice 2 or 3 days, make the drive. I've done it. We did it. A buddy and I did it. I think it was 2020. I called them up. It was about 7:30 in the morning. I said, "Be at my house, and we're going to drive to Colorado, and we're going to scout this new area." So he goes, "What time?" I said, "By 1 o'clock, we're on the road." We drove from 1 o'clock to 5 in the morning, straight through in a rental truck. In a rental truck, got to the mountain, put our packs on, dropped in. Right, we're in a two-wheel drive, street tire Toyota Tacoma. Right, no four-wheel drive. We're like 40 miles in, and I look back and I'm like, "Oh my god!" We're planning to spend the night. I'm like, "Dude, if we get stuck back here in that truck, we're screwed. Like,
Yeah.
there's no way we're getting out." So we were, 40 miles in this Tacoma. We probably went 6 or 7 miles down into the basin, and I see this thunderstorm running in. I mean, it is coming at us hard. So we book it out, and I'm like, "Look, just find the old sign. If we see the old sign, we know that there's elk." So we're running up these hills, we're hitting these benches, and I'm like, "Look, an arrow, look, a rub, look, scat." And we're just marking, booking back to the truck. We went back that September. We were in elk every single freaking day. And when we got to the truck, we hauled butt off of that road, and we drove back to Cali. We were less than 48 hours round trip. I was scouted and done. And we
Jeez.
hunted that area for 3 years in a row, had encounters every single year. You hear a lot about that unit being super crowded. In the 4 years that we hunted, I can count on two hands the amount of hunters that we came across because we made that one scouting trip.
Yeah.
We knew where the campsites were at, so we knew what we wanted to avoid. You can tell a lot from the campsites
Hmm.
just because the 2 and 3 fire rings, the burnt rocks, the burnt wood that's sitting there, how beat down the area is. That's the areas I'm going to avoid, right? If I want to park there and make a makeshift setup, so nobody messes with my stuff, they don't know if I'm in and out of camp, that's fine. But that's not my A spot. My A spot is where I saw the old sign, where I saw a spent arrow, where I saw fletching on the ground, hard, crusty, almost white elk poop, things of that nature. Old rubs that are grown over, molded. It's where they were last year, and that's
Hmm.
been my go-to every single year. It's to the point now where if I'm scouting a new area, it's very limited, very very limited. You just get kind of used to where they're going to be. And where they're going to be to get away from people, and that's the biggest one is their escape from us, right? As here in Colorado, and in just about anywhere right now, Labor Day hits and the recreators that are out, plus elk season's going, those elk are looking for a way out. So if you
Absolutely.
understand the nature of the beast, that's the areas you're going to look for, and you're going to put yourself in elk, whether it's on a south facing slope, north facing slope, southwest slope, it doesn't matter. They're
Yeah.
going to find a way out, and they're going to find cover.
Yeah. Oh no, that's it's absolutely. In fact, mentioning south facing slope was kind of funny. The area we're hunting now, there's a basin that I've always looked at and looked up at it, and that little voice inside me says, "You need to go up there and check it out. You need to go up there and check it out." But was always looking at it, and you're always like, "God, but it's on the south side of the mountain. That's the hot side of the mountain. There's no." And we actually went over there one time and started hiking up the trail, and it's like, God, this is just no. This is hot side of the mountain. And we hunted that new spot probably 2 years, and then finally, um, it was a Friday evening. I got to camp before everybody else, put my camo on, and I said, I'm just going to go on a solo mission up there. I got to silence this voice in my head that's telling me to go up there. And Eric showed up a little bit later, and I was, putting the stuff in the truck, and he goes, "Well, hold on, I'm going to go with you." And Eric had already shot a bull, and so he's like, "I'll just pack the camera and just follow you, and let's go check this place out." And man, we went up the trail and hung a right, and then next thing I know, I looked at it a little bit on X, and I knew there was a great big bench, a great big shelf, and we hung a right, and we got up on that shelf, and dude, the tracks and the trails and the rubs, and I'm like, what the heck? And we're kind of sitting there, and we got up there early enough that we kind of cruised around and checked out this bench. And I said, well, hey, on the north side of this bench where the elevation starts rising, it seems like that's a really major game trail. There's a few beds right there. Let's just go there and hang up, wait for thermals to change, and then we'll, make a play on the evening hunt. And I kind of started to feel the thermals to change, and I let out one bugle, and bang, 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 three responses.
Going off.
And
Yep.
that was the night that we filmed that one-on-one hunt that I almost killed that 6 point. And we had never been in this spot before. And I mean, we found ponds, and it was an incredible spot. So then all of a sudden it's like, okay, we got to check this out more. And we went back in a few days later, and three of us went to the right and three went to the left and got up on top of the ridge. Well, those three on top of the ridge, all of us, oh, and this day was so stinking cold. I mean, we have every layer on. You're searching for sunshine, trying to just find warmth. And, the two guys that were with me were like, hey, what do you think about building a fire? And I'm like, suck it up, Pansy. We're not building a fire. Then my phone vibrates and I open it up. Text from Bryce. And it's a picture of a freaking fire with the three of them huddled around a little fire. So, here we are hanging out over on the bench, freezing our butts off. These guys are over on the ridge. And then later at the end of the day, when we hooked back up at the rigs, I was like, I can't believe you guys built a fire. And they were like, well, you always told us, they're used to smelling smoke. They're used to smelling forest fires, not a big deal. So we didn't think. And plus, we were sitting around the fire. Oh, yeah, by the way, guys, we were nice and warm. How were you guys sitting over on the other side? And I'm like, kiss my rear end. So, and he goes, but we were sitting there and we were bugling to 6 bulls down in the draw on the backside. And while we're bugling and cow calling, we heard thump, 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 and look up. And next thing we know, we're sitting around the fire with our bows on the ground. There's a spike at 22 yards looking at us. I'm like, so wait a minute. You guys built the fire, bugled back and forth to 6 bulls, and you called in a spike. I should have built a fire. So.
Yeah.
What kind of firewood do they carry?
Yeah, well, it's just picking up what's on the ground there. So, but one of the things that I learned preseason, and this was a hard lesson for me to learn, especially early on in my career, is don't fall in love with an area.
Yeah.
Because I would go into areas that would be some of the most elkiest looking areas.
Yeah.
And you'd find a little bit of sign, and of course you find that little bit of sign and it's like, oh well, yeah, there's been a elk here. And so then you focus on that area, and especially if you're coming from out of state and you're limited on the number of days, you could spend 2-3 days in that area. There might only be 2 or 3 elk. They might just be, some solo bulls that are cruising around, and the chance of you bumping into them is pretty slim. So, I learned early on, don't fall in love with an area. Don't be afraid to branch out and find, because you never know what's going to be on the backside of the next ridge or the next drainage over.
That happens a lot with transition, and you and I have had that conversation several times, right? And that in my head, that's the worst place to get them. I think, matter of fact, I was on the side of a mountain a few years ago going, dude, I'm getting my R's kicked here. And it was big, and I told you, it's like stopping them on the frickin' freeway, right?
Yep.
And I think that's what happens is you got that transition corridor, you got droppings everywhere, you can see and smell the slime and the fresh piss, and you're picking up, you're like, oh my God. And then we're stuck in a transition area because it's just loaded with sign. But it's like, hey, you better be there at the right time, and you better be ahead of them because you ain't turning them SOBs around.
Yeah.
I've had 2 that I was able to turn around in all the years now in transition, and I think that happens a ass ton.
It does.
In transition. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's like trying to stop a car on the freeway with a stop paddle at 80 miles an hour. Like,
yeah.
They tried to stop them. They don't stop. Doesn't matter. They may answer you, but they won't.
Yeah, they'll pause and look back, but you ain't turning them around most times.
Like we've talked several times in those transitional areas, it's a few episodes back where where I talked about call shy elk and those people that are like, oh yeah, you bugle in my area and elk run the other way. And most of the time they're in these transitional corridors that, when the elk are answering, yeah, they're bugling back and they're basically saying, hey, we're right here. This is the direction we're heading.
Yep.
come with us. But most people stay right there in the transition area, and they're like, oh, they're call shy. They're running away. No, they have that
Or
destination
you
point. So
or you set up, right? They're in transition. I can clearly see them going A to B. One answers me, so then I'm standing in front of the tree with the arrow knocked, mirror, 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 right? As I watch them walk away, going, damn,
yeah.
damn, what did I do, right? I mean, it's just, it's a trip, man.
Oh,
I
but
mean,
those are early on rookie mistakes that we've all made. We don't understand elk behavior. We don't understand elk habitat. We don't understand bedding areas and transition areas and feeding zones and how each of those play into their daily cycle and their routines and what they do and also too what they do when pressure comes. And but it's amazing how many people will focus on those transition areas because they do get bugling activity in those transition areas, because elk typically will start getting quiet when they get close to their bedding area. They'll mill around a little bit, but they want to be silent. They want to slip in and bed down. And so people will focus on those transition areas, and then 10 o'clock in the morning, most of those people are rolling off the mountain going back to camp, and they're staying in camp till 5 o'clock.
yeah, well, the transition too is in my head. It's the easiest area to identify,
It is.
right? In terms of sign, you're going to see the most sign, through those travel corridors and whatnot. And I think that's a lot of the holdup. But you answered the question that you asked me earlier, right? You
Hmm.
said, "What's my preseason scouting look like?" And in that statement leading up to that, you just said elk behavior, things of that nature. I mean, that's really what preseason is about, is understanding that, right? Calling is great. Like I love my scenario calling, but man, that elk behavior is going to lead me into more animals and calling in more animals than any amount of boots on the ground scouting. Unless I'm looking for a particular bull,
Hmm.
man, that behavior is second to none.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And there's actually times too that like we're heading up this weekend, and we're kind of scouting a new area. It's just to the south of where we have been, just because, yeah, I mean, last year we got inundated with so many people, and I think part of that was because of the fire. But we're like, okay, we got to have backup plans. I mean, we always have backup plans, but this is an area that we've been looking at, and we're using it as an excuse to go in and check this area out, because I mean, we could show back up in our normal camp and it could be inundated with people again. And if you don't have that plan B, plan C, plan D, you're going to spend a major portion of your hunt trying to find somewhere to go, trying to find animals. And that's where, I mean, e-scouting is good to narrow down the area. And I know, we've done, this year we've done some actual over the shoulder e-scouting where, you guys have watched me, look at a new area on Fat Map and dissect it and break it down. But then I also said, okay, in this new area, here's zone 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now it's time to put boots on the ground and see what the sign's telling me. And the other thing too that I like that you said, Guy, is when you go scouting, you get in, gather the information you want, and get out. You
Hmm.
don't
I don't
hang out
linger.
there.
I don't linger.
So
No sense in lingering, right? One, it's not so much about the animals, right? Because if it's their production area, their summer area, where they're going to start rutting and breeding, they're not. Chances are they're not there in good number. But what
yeah,
I don't want to do is I don't want to clue anybody else to the fact that there's boots on the ground there.
yeah,
I mean, I'll go as much as, uh, if I see a bottle cap, I'll pick it up.
yeah,
You know what I mean? And it's a twofold thing, right? If a hunter thinks another hunter is there, not knowing the area, they're going to assume that there's been success in that area. And it's worked for me. It sounds a little bit quirky, but man, I'll sweep that damn area like you wouldn't believe.
You know what? So funny you mentioned that, because last year, uh, focused on a new area within our, or let's say a new zone within our hunt area that I really wanted to learn, and the e-bikes gave us the ability to get in there, and ended up naming this place Shangri-La. And then I found that there's a trail from the other side that you can get in there on. And we did a bonsai trip up there the last day of the season. It's like, hey, one more day, we got one more tag. Let's go see if we can fill it. We're walking in the trail, and sitting right in the trail is an empty IPA can, an empty beer can that was fresh. It was not there before. And so I went down to pick it up and I was going to put it in my pack. And of course, that's you lazy SOBs, blah,
Mm-hmm.
blah. What kind of people are coming in here drinking beer? And then the light bulb went off and went, how many other people would see that beer can and think, man, I'm staying away from this area. There's freaking idiots packing beer in here and they're just going to ruin my hunt. So I left that beer can sitting right in the middle of the trail.
See, and I'm the opposite. I wanted a place that looks like ain't nothing been there.
And
I
see,
want to sweep it all under a rug.
that's normally how I am too, but then my psychology mind kicks in and going, most people that are out here that are truly hunting don't really want to be in an area if there's
With
people
other folk. Yeah.
drinking beer and hunting, and man, these guys can't be too serious, and what kind of person is going to do this? And so the psychology mindset said leave it. The sneaky part of me was like pick it up and
Pick it
remove
up and
all
take it.
sign.
Yeah, buddy. I
Good
would agree
red
to a point,
sword.
but there's so many people hitting the woods, and
Yeah,
there's so many people coming into the woods, not for the lack of a better word, green. So
yeah,
any sign is good sign for someone that has no clue.
yeah.
Right? I'm picking it all up, buddy.
What were you saying, Greg?
Picking up, I like to pick up and clean things up, but it's a two-edged sword. One, it shows that nobody's been in there if you clean it up. Two, if it's fresh, something, then it tells somebody that, well, maybe somebody's up ahead of me. Maybe
Yeah,
I don't want to go in. So it's sixes, but just in my own heart, I want to pick it up and get it
Yeah.
out of there.
Yeah. I don't want
oh,
trash there.
oh, I've actually gone to the point where I've taken a branch and wiped the trail for 100 yards, wiped all elk tracks away. And then I've actually walked up and down 6 or 7 or 8, 9 times on that section. So all you see is just a gaggle of boot tracks.
Yeah. Oh, I
Get
brush it.
the
I'm telling
cat
you,
off
I
the
will
trail.
sweep an area, dude. you know, you so here where I'm hunting now on the flats, it's fairly roaded, right? So you're doing a lot of road travel, and then I'm just dropping into drainage, just dropping into basins. So I
Yeah.
have the side by side, and I'll run the side by side, and I'll park it, opposite. Typically, I'll park away from where I'm going, man, and I'll sweep when I walk across the road. I don't want any sign. I don't want anybody following me, you know. But
Yep.
yeah,
Amen.
that's funny.
All right. So covered lessons learned. So now we're going to open Pandora's box and we're going to open up a lot of things here, and we're going to talk about lessons learned during the season. And Guy, I'll leave it up to whether you just want to just start rolling down with different topics, or if you want to break it down to early season, pre-rut, peak rut, post rut,
I
or
mean,
we can just go season as a whole and just talk about everything.
I'd really just go season as a whole, right? I mean, the
Okay.
last couple 3 Septembers, it's been 30 days on the mountain, um, and there's variability in pre post and during, but not much. Um, you and I had talked about getting into that low audible stuff, and I think it's overlooked like crazy, right? I
Yeah.
mean that ability that you should have out there on the mountain, and kind of thwarting the preached, bugle, 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 ridge, ridge, bugle, 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 chuckle,
Right.
chuckle, right? Um, Man, that hurts more of us than I think most of us would admit. And the light bulb, I don't know, Mike, what was that? 3 years ago?
Yeah. Yeah. Three, four
three,
years
four
ago now.
years ago, and the low audible sounds were just so powerful in the woods, man. I had slowed it down, and just started really, really paying attention to everything. And the things that you hear when you decide to do that are phenomenal. I mean, you'll
Yeah.
hear elk sounds that you didn't even know about. I mean, I've heard them. You hear that. You ever watch one of them Bigfoot shows and you'll hear the clack,
Yep.
clack on the trees? I had 3 bulls, and there was let's see, we were facing southeast, me and my boy. So we had one at our 9 o'clock, 11 o'clock, and just between 8 and 9, and clack, one would answer the other, and then you'd hear it whack, whack, and my boy looks over at me and he goes, "What in the hell is that, Dad?" And I said, "That's Bigfoot, boy." And they sat there, and I'm not kidding you. They did it for probably a good 15 to 20 seconds. A
Yeah.
couple of them sounded off 3 times that way, and then one of them just did it once. But then they go into the rake on these two sides.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, wow, you just gave me the confirmation that, you guys are talking in something that I've never heard anybody talk about. I've never heard it any other time. And it was such an eye opener. And I think it was that moment that made me go, whoa, we're going to slow this down and we're going to listen to everything.
Yeah.
And my encounters since then have been 60, 70 fold,
Yeah.
slowing down and listening to it, and then just starting to come in on the mimicry with it, right?
Yeah.
Is snapping a twig as I'm walking intentionally. Raking is one of my favorite, absolute
Yeah.
favorite strategies, man. It's just I carry that daggum stick around with me, and everybody goes, "Why do you have a stick? Why don't you just pick one up?" And I'm like, one, I'm too superstitious. Two, I've picked up dry rot sticks in blown situations.
Yeah.
So I carry that freaking redwood, ass whooper around with me, man. And it
Yeah.
sounds just like an antler beating it. I get worked up. The animals get worked up. We've had bulls, for 45 minutes, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth on the rake. Um, so those little audibles, man, I mean, I
Well,
don't think they can be beat in the woods.
and remember early on in one of our conversations when we were talking about raking, and I talked about taking that stick and crack on the side of that tree, and you get that crack, and then you pause, and then cha-cha, and then you get that chatter in, and you do some raking, and then you pause a little bit and you throw that crack back in there again, and that's that crack that you were kind of talking about, that because that crack's going to travel a little bit farther than what actual the raking sound is. And yeah, you're exactly right with low audible sounds, and with more and more people getting in the woods, and they're just focusing on those bugles, and it goes back to the question that I asked nonstop in here in Elk Calling Academy is, are you calling like a human, or are you calling
Oh
and
my
making
God.
sounds like an elk? And that's the thing, that those low audible sounds, because not very many people are doing it. Those to me, and I mean, Guy, you've been around me and talked to me enough that that I preach that realism,
Hmm.
doing the little things that add realism into your calling, and that low audible sound is one of those things. And I mean, I don't know how many times when I'm doing a lesson and I get into low audible sounds, like just the huffs and the grunts, and even the glunking, and so many people will be like, God,
Really?
is that really necessary? I mean, are they going to be able to hear that? And just like you, and until you really tune your ears to
Yep.
it, you don't realize it's there, or you don't realize really how well you can hear that.
Hmm.
And then all of a sudden it's like, holy crap. But with
It's
the
all. Oh,
influx,
sorry. Sorry.
oh, I was going to say, with the influx of people, those low audible sounds, I mean, that's one thing that we've noticed the last few years is they're becoming more and more of a hot button, and more of a response getter. And when I say response, it's not always just a bugle back. It could be a rake back, or it could just
Uh
just a
huh.
little huff, or
I've heard them stomp, scrape, the whole
oh,
nine. I,
the hiss. Yeah.
Mike, it's lichen kind, right? And you could liken it to, the wolf thing up there in Idaho with you guys, right?
Uh-huh.
Everybody and their mama said, man, the basins are quiet. We'd hear 20 bulls in that basin. Well, it's the same thing. If you increase predation on any landscape, those
Hmm.
animals are going to adjust
They're gonna
to that
adapt.
predation,
Yeah.
right? I'm not going to scream. I got $100,000 in a backpack and I'm walking down the middle of the hood. I'm not going to scream, I got $100,000 in my backpack,
Yeah.
right? It's just not going to happen, right? I might whisper into my phone, yeah,
Yeah.
pick me up, I got $100,000. Whatever. If I'm in the hood, I got $100,000. We're doing something wrong. But anywho, right? It's like in kind. So we got to go out. We got to evaluate what the elk are doing, and the only way to do that is to slow down, come out. We got to put ourselves in an uncomfortable situation because we think it's roar, roar,
Yeah.
roar, 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 right, and then we don't hear anything, and then we go, oh, why they're just silent elk.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so if you have the realization that it's silent elk, go flippin' silent.
Yeah.
That's when you're going to start hearing it, and then you can respond like in kind. If they are low audible, they know who's in their neighborhood. Go low audible, and you're gonna have encounters.
You are.
I don't
Match
care
the
who you are.
surroundings. I
Yeah.
th I actually think the low audible actually creates more curiosity than anything. But you said something that really rings true and puts elk behavior into human perspective. Okay, if you're in the hood, if you got $100,000, you're not going to shout it out. If you're hunting an area that has a low bull to cow ratio, and if there's
Yes.
one bull in there that has 5 or 6 cows, why on earth is he going
Is
to
he
be
gonna
bugling
know?
at the top of his
That's right.
lungs?
Yep.
He's not. He's still going to be making rutting noises. He's still going to be doing the sounds that are synonymous with the rut in September, but it's the low audible sounds because he doesn't want to draw attention to
That's
himself.
right.
He doesn't want to do it. So then when people go into those areas and they're luling at the top of their lungs and broadcasting and bouncing off canyon walls, that one bull that's down there is like, mm-mm, I don't want you anywhere
I don't
near
want nothing
me.
about it. Yep.
Yep. I
And,
ain't.
and then so last year, right? My neighbor across the street wanted to archery elk hunt, so got him going or whatever. And I just told him, I go, look, dude, if you can't call, if you think you can call, I don't want you calling. I'll take you out. I'll show you what to do. You're not calling. So we get out and we're coming up the road. We're in the side by side, and there's 6 vehicles, 6 or 7 trucks parked. And I stopped, and I go, this wasn't the insult that you thought it was when I told you that. So I turned the side by side off, and we just sat there in the middle of the road. And he's looking at me like, "What the hell are we doing? Let's go hunt." And I go, "No, I want you to listen." Right? So we just start listening, and I'm not kidding you. It's 400 to 500 yards. Okay, you got 6 or 7 trucks stacked in 400 or 500 yards, and every single mf'er is just bugle, 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 chuckle, chuckle, bugle, bugle, bugle. And I looked at him and I go, Graham, what do you think the elk are going to do? They're not freaking stupid. You know what I mean? They're used to this every single year, right? The older cows, they're going to booger. The older bulls, they're going to booger. They've already experienced this. And he looks at me and he goes, holy crap. So we buzz, we drive a little further, we turn off on this little road. I go, we're going down here, and we set up a little camp. And the next morning, we were in 200 head, and he was like, "What in the world?" And I'm like, "Dude, they got to escape on a south-facing slope in an exposed basin. Okay,
Yeah.
they want to escape every Tom, Dick, and Harry that is excited about throwing off a challenge bugle,
Yeah.
right? You know what? We've all done it. It's fun as all get up when that one bull out of 200, when that one bull wants to respond to that because he's fired up, right? You have that one opportunity. But we waste so much energy for one flipping opportunity. I could have reached out of my tent that night and grabbed a hoof. They literally walked through our camp and bedded not 50 yards down slope of us until the morning we got up. Just a little punky light locate and bulls screaming all over the place. We were in 200 head of elk with no effort, none. We just said, no, we're not going to do this,
Yeah.
right? And we had one, two, so 5 bulls were bugling, and they're moving down basin. And I know you have. I'm not sure about the other gentleman. You're not keeping up with 200 head of elk on your best day downhill on a unicycle, right?
No.
I mean, it just ain't happening. So we're dogging them, playing the wind, and dogging them, and you can hear them, but everything was herd talk, and it
Yep.
was localized to, they what they did is they were all together on the Exodus, and
Yep.
then they micro herded,
Yeah.
right? So we had 5 or 6 micro herds, and you can just hear all the little herds and all the herd talk just amongst themselves. It got to the point where as they separated in this basin, and you're talking, it's huge basin, man. I mean, you're from uh, just north of I-70 to where we dropped in is 8 miles as a crow flies, and the entire basin stretches from east to west about 3.5 miles. I mean, it is
Mm.
freaking massive, right? I mean, so as they're talking and they're moving, it just becomes localized. And as they grew apart, the bulls stopped communicating with each other, and then it was just localized talk to where we can get up on a herd, we could check out how many cows he had, identify the bull, see if we wanted to approach that bull, see the kind of response we got from that bull, and then keep moving in. But everything was that huff got more responses from bulls and cows, and primarily the matriarch of the herd,
Yeah.
right, than anything we used the rest of the time. I can throw a regathering mew in, and the only thing I would do was piss off the cow. Once I heard the huff, I just started doing it.
Yeah.
We approached all but one of the micro herds with just huffs. That was all we did.
Look
So
at
low audible fan, man.
look at you throwing matriarch out. It's Big Word Wednesday, folks.
Ah,
So
well, that's
we
think
use that
about
word two more times tonight, and we'll own that word.
think about the when we talk about elk behavior,
Yeah.
right? There's no word that's more important than here's one. We got one more after this. Matriarch. Right?
Oh,
I mean, they're
absolutely. I mean, she's the one that knows the travel corridor. She
right.
knows. I mean, she knows everything. She knows the migration routes in the winter, migration routes in the spring. She knows where the meadows for the nursery groups are. She knows. I mean, she is the one that leads everything, and she's that one too. That if you're doing something that she don't like, she's the
She's
one that's
taking
going to taking
everybody. Yeah.
everybody away. And
Yep.
Here's one
And
thing
who is
too
she? Who is she?
that she's the matriarch.
Yeah,
There
buddy,
we are.
that's
We
two right
own
there.
it.
We
So
own it.
no, that made me think about a lesson, because you were talking about the localized herd talk, and here's something that a lot of people don't realize, especially new, because they don't study the behavior. I remember one time, God, early on, I was probably 7 8 miles back in, nobody else around, working a herd, and same thing, they were moving up to their bedding areas, and I was kind of dogging them, on the side, and then the bugling just stopped, and all I heard was mews and chirps and this and that, and that's at that time, that's all I could do on a diaphragm, and so I was primarily just doing mews and chirps, and I working towards them, and kind of getting set up, and then all of a sudden I just meow
Hmm.
coming towards me, meow, and I'm like, well, okay, I'm fairly new. I don't have a problem shooting a cow. I mean, we're still early on. We're still trying to figure this stuff out. And the next thing I know, that mew comes around the bush, and well, that cow all of a sudden has a pretty impressive headgear.
Rack.
So and
Yeah.
and yeah, so as they kind of got into those localized areas and getting closer to the bedding area, that bull stopped bugling, but he was still communicating with the
Hmm.
herd with mews. And not a lot of people, especially are new into elk hunting, realize that bulls mew also. And but if you think about it, when they're born as a calf, they don't come out of the womb bugling.
Bugling. That's
Their
right.
their first few years, their only form of communication is mews
Is
and
news.
chirps.
Yeah, that's right.
So, just like the fact with cows bugling. So, just because you've got something coming towards you that's mewing, don't automatically assume that it is a cow,
Cow.
especially if you are doing that herd talk, that herd communication, because you never know.
Never
So
know.
that was definitely a lesson learned that you jog the memory on.
So you brought up pre, during, and post rut, and that was a lot of my focus early on. But as I've been in the woods, and as I've been able to be there from opening day to closer and beyond, one of the things that I noticed it is, and it goes back to the low audible stuff, is I feel like there it has less to do about where they are in that breeding season and more about the predation, traffic, and their production areas, right?
Hmm.
I think we're pushing them faster than we usually do. Last year, we didn't hear anything on opener, so it was the second day of season, and it was just an absolute melee when I just sent out that little, I mean, just a punky locate. It just caused the world to go on fire. And after that, I don't think I don't think I heard another bugle until October when I went to New Mexico.
Oh wow.
It was one day, and everything else was a chirp, a mew, a rake, a huff, a twig breaking, and September 2nd all the way to the 30th, and
Yeah.
that was it, man. Um, it is it's
Greg,
a silent game at this point.
yeah, didn't you say last year that you guys pretty quiet in your area too?
That first week was very quiet, very quiet. If we heard anything, it was just a faint cow sound. Uh, and we kept waiting for one, either the barometric pressure to get down low or temps to go low or both. Waiting for the change,
Yeah.
21st of September. And we
I
didn't
didn't see
really
it.
get things picked up until about the 25th, 26th.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, I didn't see that. What I saw was October. October, I think that was the middle of October, so the 15th ish to the
Yeah.
19th, I was in New Mexico, on fire, man.
Wow.
And I was in New Mexico for a week in the middle of September, and it was pretty much quiet unless you were listening to private land bulls.
Yeah.
We're talking, but on public, not a
Quiet.
peep, man, not a peep.
No, and that's yeah, we noticed that last year was the oddest season for us because like I had mentioned, it was the fewest amount of bugles we had ever heard in a season, but it was the highest number of call-ins we ever had in a season.
Right.
So
That was my experience, right? I talked to 13 different people on the mountain through the season, and man, I'm not kidding you. Every single one of those folks said, "I haven't even seen an elk." And I'm like, "Oh, man,
yeah,
what a rough one." I'm in elk every
yeah,
single effing day, right? And as
yeah.
much as you want to help, I don't want you to contaminate where I'm at
Uh-uh.
because you're doing something, something kind of squirrely. Unless I know you, I'm not leading you into my area. But dude, I was in elk every single day. I was passing on bulls, right? Like, "Nah, I'm not shooting that one." I was walking in, it's gray light. I'm walking up the drainage. The wind is just perfect coming through this drainage. And from end to end, it's a little timber patch that everybody was just driving by. So I'm like, okay, no one's going here. I'm going there. Man, there was so many freaking elk in there. I'm
Yeah.
walking in gray light, and I look over, and there's a little timber patch next to me, and it's probably 15 to 20 foot across. And I look, I catch movement out of the corner of my eye. I'm like, oh shit, nice six, right? And he's standing there. He has no idea. So I knock an arrow, and I'm just waiting for him to come through. He turns, and I can see his ear. So I'm like, oh man, and I kind of slowly turn around, and I got a cow. She's 10 feet behind me, her head below the branch, and she's might as well have her head up my ass. And so they booger after, I was gonna spin. I was like, all right, if you're gonna blow it, I'm gonna shoot you. So I'm slowly turning around. She boogers off. I bark. They kind of calm down and walk down. So I said, I'm gonna give them a second. I don't want to dog them too hard because all the pressure around. And I hear, I'm like, what the hell? Like I got another one coming. So I knock the arrow, scooch back in the shadows a little bit, and I look, and this dude, he's in the wide ass open in the middle of the drainage, sunlight beaming at this point, right? And just pounding trail. This is 45 minutes later. Gray light is long gone. So I'm like, meow, 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 meow. And he's walking so hard he can't hear me. So I finally was like, hey, what are you doing? He goes, oh, I saw elk come in here before light. I'm trying to find them. And I go, well, you're not going to fucking find them like that. Look where you're at. I go, and I'm dogging them right now. And I was kind of a dick about it because it just drives you crazy. Because it's like, one, you waited 45 minutes to even pursue the animals. So if you're scared of gray light, you don't belong in the fucking woods by yourself. Right? But then it's like your approach is so bad. There's so there's so much information. Like, why are we going into the woods, reckless abandon like this? and not thinking that there's other folks in the wood. I don't want to affect either two of you on your hunt if I don't know you,
Yep.
right? So
Yep.
I'm not going to go in there and be so intrusive that one, I blow the elk out, two, that I affect another hunter that I don't know's in there. I don't know what's going on, and we can't make the correlation between etiquette and elk behavior and how we should be as predators. It just doesn't. It just boggles my mind, man. It
Yeah.
is crazy. And we're
It,
still bugling like madmen. I'd rather see us go back to the hoochie mama
yeah.
than keep running through with bugles.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
realistically, we need a hoochie mama re whatever it is. You know what I mean? Just to tone it down.
Yeah.
Just we really have to get. I mean, I don't care if it's a hoochie mama, a greenie weenie, an enchantress. I think we need to just slow down, get the game changers, a really, a 3,000ths to a 2,000th latex, and go in and cow and calf, so we can get back to being excited about hearing bugles.
Yeah.
We're too damn intrusive in the woods.
Yeah, that's one thing that I've seen over time is it seems like grunt tubes bigger, more volume. That just seems the biggest thing is volume, volume, volume. And if you look at a lot of the tubes that are on the market now, a lot of their marketing approach is, oh, this is the loudest grunt tube on the market. This is the loudest bugle tube on the market. Oh, you're going to be able to get volume and reach across the canyon. You know what? If I'm hunting a big ass canyon, I don't freaking care about the elk that are on the other side. I care about
Yeah,
the elk that are on
on
my
my
side.
side.
So, because the amount of effort that it takes, especially, I mean, if it's a huge rugged canyon to get down the other side and up. Now, if I see elk on the other side, then okay, then I'm going to go, tomorrow or the next day, I'm going to come in from a different direction and I'm going to be on that side. But
Mhm.
I'm not going to go from the side I am now over. And that's another, lesson that I learned over time is, and especially a lot more lately, is especially during the quiet times, and it kind of couples with what you said earlier, slow down and hunt that area,
Yep.
especially if you have fresh sign that's telling you that elk are in the area. Slow down and hunt that area, because everybody else, like you said, is beating the ridges,
Mhm.
they're putting the miles in, they're going this and that, and there's a good number of elk that just have adapted. They just sit in there quiet, let those ridge runners go by,
Yeah.
wait until they can't hear the ridge runners anymore, and then they just pick their activity back up.
I had two bulls last year. Um, One of them was, I should have shot him because he was a rag, so I have a standard. But he was a funky rag, man. He was turned down on two of the brines on his brow tines, and this dude was 46 yards away, bedded, ready to die. And before I saw what I saw on him was an ear flicker. I was sitting in this little clearing on a log, and I was just meow, 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 meow. Right, lost calf in him, and dude, I look up, start to move, and I'm like, that son of a bitch isn't he doesn't even care that there's a calf over here, right? And I mean, I was sitting behind him for 12 or 13 minutes ish, and he had no idea, right? He was just gonna let me. He's gonna let the calf go right on by. Had care in the world. Then I had one. I was cow calling, and I heard clack, and I was like, oh, wasn't a squirrel, right? The pine cone didn't hit the floor on the crack, and so I creep up and I look up, and it's kind of this finger ridge coming down. There's a timber pile up there, and you know how much those bulls love to just get into that nastiness. And I creep up and I look, and all I can see is a single tine, and I'm thinking, I'm like, oh damn it, it's a spike. Oh, anywho, by the time he stood up, presented anything was frontal. He's 37 yards away, and he's a big old five, dude. But both of those bulls did not care that I was calling.
Hmm.
They were just like, hey, we're bedding. It's time to bed. This is what we're doing. Now, I tend to think that when they crack twigs and sticks and things like that, I tend to think that a lot of that is intentional, And that is part of the low audible, right? Because you can watch a big old six move through the trees and timber totally silent. So
Yeah.
if they're breaking something, I'm like, okay, you just, that to me is communication at this point,
Yeah.
right? I've had it happen too many times. We dogged this big old son of a bitch last year, um, and he was as silent as could be. And he
Hmm.
was, it was just like this dude had it. He had our number, Michael, like you wouldn't believe. We couldn't get this guy right. He was pissed that we were in the area acting like another bull. So he would go, and it was like I can't figure it out. I'll probably go back up there this year just to kind of trying to figure out what he was doing, that he was eluding us. But we started moving back to areas, right? We would start, then we move, and we go back to the area, because what he was doing is he would let us get to wherever we started calling from, and he would go to the last spot and let us know that he was there, and then we'd go back to that spot, and it's like, no freaking way, dude! Look at these fresh. I mean, he was right here,
Right there.
pissed off about it. And I couldn't figure him out. I
Yeah.
mean, so you're talking. Some of those rubs were, I don't know, 11 and a half, 12 and a half feet up trees,
Good
and
solid bull.
hoof prints like, I haven't.
Big.
At first, I was like, dude, that's a moose,
Yeah.
and I just couldn't figure out his strategy to it, because it's like, okay, you gotta smell us, right? The way he was playing it, you gotta smell us, but it was like he was holding to this area. I knew that the animals were in there heavy from all the beds and everything, and he was just one of those old monarch bulls, and I think he was solo. He's probably past his breeding prime. He just had the area on lock, you know.
You in there solo or with someone?
Once with Graham, and then the
Okay.
rest of the time solo.
So, because if you got somebody with you, what you can do is drop somebody there as a trailer.
Right. Yeah,
So,
and that's what we played on. Graham, being as green as he is, his patience
yeah,
is about 10 minutes long, right? I'm like, dude, this is a 35, 40-minute sit. Like, and and I look down, I'm, glassing him, and every time I look, he's after about 10 minutes, man.
yeah, yeah, and it's amazing how well that snoring drifts down the mountain too.
Oh yeah,
So,
but that bull, he was remarkable, man. He was remarkable.
let me ask you on something, because you were talking about where you were sitting down there, kind of doing some lost calf, and he was sitting a little bit from you. What was your volume on that calf
Oh,
sound?
low.
Yeah,
Like I'm. Let me see.
yeah,
Just and I'll and in that little timber patch, I'll move around. I'll go from this tree. I went to the stump, went to that tree.
yep.
Throw it here, throw it there.
Out there moving it around. But
He didn't
that's
care.
but that's one of those things too there, that again, something that I'm seeing as a trend lately is not only is it the bugles max volume, but it's your cow sounds max volume.
Yeah.
And that's where understanding your surroundings, that when you actually do get close to elk, especially in pressured areas or high predation areas, just listening to how soft they are. In fact, in that one-on-one video, there was a calf that came in, and I remember Eric and I were talking about it later, that we were like, dude, did you hear how soft she was? Wasn't projecting, wasn't anything, was communicating, but I'll bet you that she was so soft, I'll bet you couldn't hear her more than 60 yards away.
And that's another thing, right? I mean, if we're talking about how soft they are, I mean, you talk about how we hear it versus how they hear it.
Yep.
So we want to project and put, X amount of diaphragm into that call, right? When it's like, hey, their hearing is, what is it, 200, 300, 400 times
That's
better than
better.
ours,
Yeah.
right? So if we think we're soft, dial that son of a gun back 3 or 4 notches from where you think you're soft. It's going to project.
Oh yeah.
They're going to hear it if they're in that proximity. And we got to be patient. And I preach that all the time now. Like, hey, slow it down, be patient, listen to the surroundings, like in kind is the best thing that you can do. I don't care if a bull starts to bugle, don't start chuckling.
You know,
Just do what that bull's doing.
yeah. That's
Imitate.
that patience, that right there is one of the biggest lessons learned in the field.
Oh
Well, I
heck yeah.
mean, Greg, you've been elk hunting a few years. What do you how do you feel about that patience aspect of elk hunting?
That's archery is patience.
Yeah,
If you don't have patience, you have no business being in the sport. You're going to ruin it for everybody else.
yeah. And you're
Yeah.
gonna your lack of patience or your impatientness is going to ruin more setups and more opportunities probably than
And
anything.
you won't even know it.
No, you won't.
That's the worst part, right? Is there's no, and I think that's the thing is we're trying to rush to success,
Yes.
right? Instead of saying, hey, there's going to be some failures involved. I got to take some risk. I got to do things that I think are out of the norm or against what I'm seeing on whatever social media platform, whatever educational platform, or and it's not even so much the educational platforms as it is the YouTube videos that are showing 22 minutes of a 5 day hunt, right? They're gonna show the bugles,
Yeah.
so it's like, man, you slow it down and you learn those lessons, get slightly aggressive on your approach to those elk, and come out the comfort zone, man, and hit them with the low audibles.
Yeah.
There's so you're gonna fail. It's fucking elk hunting. Excuse my language. You're gonna fail,
Yeah.
right? But fail with some GD dignity
Yep.
and stop chuckling at every single frickin' sound you hear in the woods, man.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's you know every failure or blown opportunity actually has a lesson
Hmm.
contained within it if you're willing to be open and learn those lessons.
Yeah,
So
you gotta admit your fault. It's never the animal.
no.
People blame the animal, right? How many times have we heard hung up bull, couldn't get him to talk, he stopped here. Everything that you did was wrong as the elk. You're a predator trying to mimic an animal, right? You have to be what does Tony good old Tony Winthrop say? He says just elk it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what you got to do. You can't go in there and you can humanize it to understand it, but you got to play the role of the elk on the mountain because that's the only way that you're going to get it. Now,
You know,
there's going to
I
be some dumb luck.
there is, but I remember that reminded me of early on in my career in the hunting industry, was working for an outfit, and the father was telling me about an interaction no, actually it was the son that was telling me about an interaction that he had with his father. His son had gone out, and I think he was in high school, went out elk hunting, and he'd grown up. His dad had been in the elk world, and but he went out hunting and he came back that night and was all excited because he had an encounter with a bull, and he was telling his dad the story about getting in a bugling match with this bull, and the bull hung up like you talked about, and basically the dad was like, well, what'd you say to him?
Yeah.
What do you mean, what did I say to him? What did you
Yeah.
say to him? What was he saying to you? And that's the other thing of lessons learned over the years is that there is different. A bugle's not a bugle, and a cow call is not a cow call. They have different meanings. They have different sayings. Some are asking you to come to me. Some are asking you to stay away. And if you don't recognize or understand what that elk is asking for,
Or what you're asking
or
for.
what you're asking for, yeah, vice versa, and you're gonna get in those situations where there's the hangups, and you're gonna have a great time
But
until
you're
the
not going
bull
to have
gets.
the encounters.
No, no.
So that brings us full circle on the low audible,
Hmm.
right? If I'm announcing position and I'm, we have this weird cadence as humans where we want to hold a locate bugle, um, 10 seconds, right? You hear, he knows where it is. Low audible, it it burns the fire of curiosity. He can't pinpoint it. He doesn't know whose voice it is. He doesn't know what animal it is. He's gonna move that direction. So
Yep.
you run the low audible calls and you run them short and you run them sweet. And if you're, for me, it's solo, right? And I'm not sure, but for a lot of folks, we're hunting with partners, but solo calling is a bit different, right? I have to be behind myself and I have to be shooter. I have to be caller and shooter all in one. Low audible lends itself to solo hunting elk more than saying, hey, this is exactly where I'm at. We've all called elk and watched them walk and stare 12 yards away from exactly where we were. They can't pick up the low audibles like that. And in proximity, if you're within the red zone, call it 80 to 100 yards, and you're just letting off short, sweet, low audible sounds, curiosity is going to breed, man. He's going to come in. It's just, to me, it's the best situation for what you said, pre, during, and post rut.
Yeah.
There is, period. The sounds will transcend through all of the pieces of season in any state that you're in.
Yeah.
In September, August in the PNW, September in any other state, and then even getting into those late rifle and muzzleloader seasons where
October.
in some instances where a bugle is not necessarily what's going on in the woods consistently, but the low audibles, it's 24/7. They're always communicating.
And the other thing too is the low audible sounds. It doesn't matter if it's 85 degrees on the mountainside. It doesn't matter if it's 15 degrees on the mountainside. It doesn't matter if it's no moon, full moon, quarter moon, any of that.
Yep.
It's those are a consistency all throughout the season that is not affected by any of the other sounds whatsoever.
Period. Yep.
So
They're running silent and very quiet, very short cow calls worked the best last year for us. Seemed like any bugle, it just kept them a couple hundred yards away. And then now you're playing the chasing game. And
yeah,
Which is especially now, right? I mean, they've seen it. You're not the first guy that bugled to them, and some of those older animals, they're hip to it, right? They know who's in the area, and if we press them, 200 head are diving off that South Basin that nobody wants to drop into, but
Yeah.
crazy man here, and even then, right? That basin is so big. I'm a 2 mile limit in that basin because I'm predominantly solo. It's early September. It's 70 to 80 degrees. I gotta pack that animal out of there, so I have to temper my desire to drop in, realize that these gray hairs mean a whole heck of a lot, and I can't drop into that basin, 6 miles. It's amazing, and it's a huge. I mean, just the production in that area is absolutely freaking remarkable.
Fritz and I walked into a spot we were going to drop the packs off and then split up. And Fritz is in the process of getting his straps off on his pack. I've set my bow down and started in on the pack, but we both started in on the cow calling, your breeding sequence and that stuff. And all of a sudden we can hear, and from about 150 yards, there's a cow just beeline it for us. And she stopped about 15 yards in front of us. My bow's about 10 feet over this way, and Fritz has got his pack half off. It's just the low.
But you
cow
can't
sound.
freeze.
and there's the lesson from the field right there.
Yeah.
Take your frickin' pack off and have your bow in your hand before you make
Before
any
you- yeah.
elk sound, because
Well,
you
and-
never know where they're at and how fast it can happen.
But then too, right? If you're in that position, the worst case is you blow it by going and grabbing your bow or continuing to take the pack off. Right on the other end of that spectrum, I'm frozen like this, or I'm looking at my bow, and you know what I mean? I'm a statue. The elk are going to move off anyway.
They're gonna move off anyways.
Yeah, so you might as well risk it because you already blown it.
Yeah, exactly. So you might as well try to do something. And
Yeah, go for it.
you
Both just flabbergasted that wow, that was quick. Unexpected.
oh,
Yeah.
it's
It looked
it's
good.
it's amazing how that happens.
It's a matter of seconds.
More times than not. Especially if you've had a few days where you're kind of getting your teeth kicked in, and you've kind of been struggling a little bit, and your focus kind of drops a little bit, and you kind of get a little lackadaisical, and then all of a sudden something like that happens,
Or
and
it
then you're
happens the
just
first or second day of the season.
Yep. Yeah, and
Right?
then you're kicking yourself in the butt. But it's funny. You reminded me of where you talked about elk coming in, and looking, 12, 15 yards away, from the spot that you had called from, and it kind of goes back to elk in the transition areas. I remember one year that was dogging a herd up, and God, the bull would sound a little faint, and then next time he would sound close, and I'm like, oh, he's coming back. So you knock an arrow, you get set up, you're doing your thing, and then next time he bugles again, he's faint, and you're like, oh, now he's going away again. So you start trucking again, and then he bugles and he's close. You knock the arrow, you get set up, and you're doing, and reality, he's been the same distance the whole stinking time. Just the only difference is him bugling away from you versus
Or
him
towards you.
bugling towards you.
Yes.
And I remember that's one of the things that that threw me off at first. It was like, what the heck is he just running up the trail and then coming back a little bit and then bugling and then running back up and coming back a little bit, and then it finally got to the point where I could see him and then watch what he's doing. And that's one of the things that I think is the best lessons learned in the field, is the ability to watch elk behavior, their communications, how they interact with each other, whether they're on the move, if they're in a bedding area, if they're up during the middle of the day, if they're in a feeding zone. Just the ability to sit and watch their interactions and their behavior can give you some of the biggest lessons
Hmm.
from the field that I think anything. And also too, even if you're in a setup and you have a call in, the ability to see that elk from a distance and how they're coming in, how they're, especially, if you're on a 2-on-1 scenario where you got a caller behind you and you're the ability to be the shooter up front, watching how he's interacting. And I think this is one thing that a lot of new elk hunters don't do, is they don't study and pay attention to behaviors, how he's reaction, what's happening with his ears, what is he doing with his body gesture based on the sounds that's coming behind me, and the ability to watch that and study that, I think, can give you so much information.
Yep.
It's part of the waiting and watching.
It is,
Well,
but
that's
when you're,
the 95% of the lessons are going to come from the field, right? And I think
yeah,
we're so heavily reliant, and this is not. I'm not saying there's a detriment to, the ECAs of the world, or the other modules, but it's really a small portion of the available information that's out there, right? I mean, that it's huge, man, and we want to do everything in this rushed. We want to rush to success so much. I forget who I was talking to recently, and I was thinking about it. I was like, I enjoy getting my ass stomped more than I do killing animals at this point, because the knowledge base has increased 1,000-fold by the ability to just say, you know what, I want to be able to be the 98% guy over my lifetime, and not just this year or
yeah,
next year or the next 2 years. So slowing down and going, you know what, I'd rather learn from this situation and then see how it unfolds, try different things, see what works, see what doesn't. I'm stronger the next encounter.
yeah,
That was what, 2 years ago. I called for Brandon Waddell for 7 days,
yeah,
and that dude come off the mountain. To actually a guy last year that I helped, both of them crying like that was the most beautiful shit I've ever seen. Those elk ran because I blew them out 200 yards. They jumped over the fence, and somehow you turned them around, and the lead cow jumped back and towed everybody with her, and the bull never left. I go, that wasn't the bull, that was me.
yeah,
Right? But the ability to sit there and watch and go, oh, okay, been here, done that.
yeah,
Let's try this, right? And it'll yank them in. But if you don't take a hold of what the elk are teaching us,
yeah.
you're foobarring yourself.
And,
It's just it
it,
doesn't translate into success year after year after year.
No, and that's really, what ECA and the other platforms are for, is to, give the information from those years worth of lessons. But you can watch a video, you can hear somebody talk about a situation or a behavior until you experience firsthand, and that light bulb goes off and it's like,
Yes.
oh, holy crap, that's what he was talking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't resonate. But the ability to go on a platform, then go out, then recognize it, you're going to recognize those behaviors faster, which in turn is going to, hey, shorten that learning curve so that you
Yeah.
find success faster
Well,
in the outputs. So,
but see, that's a perfect segue into that, right?
yeah,
People have to understand that that's what it is. You're
yeah,
shortening the learning curve. We can't, no one can skyrocket us from to success, right? We can shoot for the stars and we're going to hit the moon type thing. But man, that learning curve can flatten a little bit. That's what it really is about. And
yeah.
that's the beautiful thing, right? About people that are passionate about that, you being one of them, and translating that and saying, hey, like this episode, lessons from the field, right? I mean, you can't you can't shorten it. You can
No.
you can flatten it. We say shorten the learning curve. It can flatten, but
Latin.
that some
Yeah.
bitch is still from
It's
this end to that end.
it's
There is a
still
start, but there is no end.
Yeah,
yeah.
because you're
Always
always
learn.
learning,
No, you're
always
you're
learning.
you're always learning and you're always making mistakes. I mean, we've talked about that especially early on in the season when you're not back into that out groove yet, and then all of a sudden you have an encounter and you just you screw it up royally, and you
Hold
just look
on.
at yourself and kick yourself and go, God, I knew better.
That's part of the problem. Okay, there. What the hell is the elk groove? This is a year-round pursuit. Like
Yeah,
legitimately, it's a year-round pursuit. If you want to go in the wood and have encounters and be able to select the animal that you want to shoot, it has to be a year-round pursuit. There's too much information, and the animals are going to change from year to year to year depending on weather, depending on predation, depending on the climate. You have to be in tune with that the entire year. If you miss any phase of that year pursuit, you are going to hinder yourself on the mountain.
yeah.
Like, I want to know what the hell the almanac looked like for the last 70 years. Right? Can I make a correlation between this year and that year? Go back into my parks and wildlife database and see what herd numbers look like from counts. See what success rates look like from counts and understand what the weather patterns. This is a year-long pursuit if you are into it. And I hate to cut it short. I thought we were going to be an hour, so I'm a few minutes late to a recording.
Oh, we'll wrap it up. So, no, that was a great point to end on there, and it just kind of touches where you were talking about with the amount of information that's available out there.
Yeah, it's crazy,
So,
man. It's crazy.
absolutely.
But brother,
So,
I'm honored to be on this side of it. Yeah, it was. I thought about it today, and I was like, that's freaking awesome, man.
yeah, we'll have you back again. We're going to start doing this more and
Yeah, I'm happy to do
bring
it
guests
anytime,
in.
brother.
So appreciate you coming in. So as always, guys, we'll wrap it up for tonight. As always, keep calling, keep practicing. More importantly, though, have fun, and we'll catch you guys in 2 weeks on the next episode of Wapiti Live Q&A. Have a
Great,
good
good
one,
talking
everybody.
with you, man.
Nice listening to you guys.
Thank you, brother.